Welcome, everyone, to Wealth Strategies Unleashed, our podcast by Concenture Wealth Management right here in Houston. I'm Robert Gilliland and
Karen Hyder.
And Mike Alexander.
And thank you all for joining us for this other podcast. I think this one's going to be really, really exciting. When you go to think about it, people are emotional when it comes to their money. That's what we're going to talk about, is being emotional about your money and how that goes through and affects what happens and how you treat and view your money. And so when you go and you think about this, what kind of hits you first?
Well, I think the first thing is that for most people, money is emotional, right? And they are very, very sensitive to things like volatility. It's not uncommon for anyone who's worked for a company for a number of years to be in some ways, let's just say, married to that investment. And so sometimes, the emotions will carry the day and they'll decide, you know what, I know that diversifying my portfolio might make a lot of sense, but I don't know. I worked for this company for 25 years. I don't ever want to sell any of it.
Yeah, there are a lot of people with Enron who love the company and at $80 and work for the company, and at 17 still love the company, and at 0 they were not quite as enamored by the company, right?
Well, and I think to your point, Robert, there are lots of situations where you only hear about the people who are concentrated in something when it goes up. It's kind of rare that you actually hear about somebody who was concentrated in something that actually went down. That's not exactly fodder for discussion at your local cocktail party.
Right. When you go through when you go through and think about, Karen, and some of the interactions that you've had, what have been some of the things that you find pretty interesting about how people view money?
I think one thing we've noticed as people's net worth grows, as they see the numbers on their statement start to get bigger and bigger, I think there's a correlation. People start to feel more emotional about their money.
Well, one of the things that I find that's pretty interesting, right, and we have these conversations, especially in periods of market volatility, is that someone may own have an investment, and let's say they bought it at 50, and that investment goes up to 100, and then it drops down to 75. They actually feel a physical loss. They had no intention of selling it at 100. But they actually feel as if they've lost money. And that phenomenon, that relationship to money, the reality is that they're still up 50%. But they feel as if they just lost 25%.
That's 100% right. I mean, it is not uncommon to become emotionally attached, if you will, to what we call the high water mark, and that means that when I look at my statement, and I can remember that when the market hit its peak, I can remember exactly where I was. And for a lot of investors, they look at it and say, they might say to themselves, well, if it gets back to that number, that we're going to sell. And of course, the emotional ride to get back to that number is usually one that feels pretty good. And so they get back to the number and they decide, you know what, it's going to keep going higher.
I knew it.
I knew it. And I think people are also tied. They're also tied to the other side of that, which is when something is actually going down. And let's just say hypothetically, I bought something at 50 and now it's at 25, and you think, gosh, I loved it at 50, but at 25 I don't like it quite so much. I don't want to buy more of it, but I don't want to sell what I have. I just want to wait until it gets back to 50.
That's right. That's the big fallacy, right? In market volatilities and with different sectors and how they flow in and out, people become emotionally attached to a number. And that becomes a real problem in going through to effectively manage that account. And that's really, really important right here, right now. How should people think about how they emotionally view money? Because it is emotional.
Well, I'm not emotional about money. So, Karen?
Unless it's yours.
Unless it's mine. Unless it's mine.
And so, I think, does it make sense how I ask that? Is just being aware and understanding that, hey, I'm still up 25%. How should people view that?
Well, I think to Mike's point, you almost kind of have to take emotion out of it in some ways. It is an emotional thing. It is your money, but you also have to keep in mind, like we've talked about before, what your goals are, what you're trying to do with your money, and keep that in the back of your mind at the same time. Because if you try to emotionally make your decisions, it's probably going to be to your detriment. Having a plan in place and having identified what you're trying to do with your money over time can help you keep emotion out of it and make smarter money decisions that will hopefully benefit you over time.
Yeah, and I think, to your point, Karen, when markets are doing really, really well, people tend to get this kind of euphoric sense that nothing can absolutely go wrong. And then when things are not going so well, people can become very, very pessimistic, as if to say things are never ever going to be good again. The only thing I think that we could all agree on is that markets have gone up and down over the years many, many times for many different reasons. 100% of the time they've tended to go on to new highs. So sometimes it's just a matter of playing the waiting game. But I think the idea is that as investors, we all have to think about what is it about my needs and the goals that I have in place. Have any of those changed? Because those are the things that that I might have some level of control over. What markets are doing on a daily basis, we have no control over.
Well, it's real interesting to take what you just said. If you go back to look at the tech bubble back in 2001, 2002, you go back to look at that, there were a tremendous number of portfolios where people had technology, and they called it a safe blue chip portfolio. When you dug it in and realized that they had nothing but technology in there, and the fact that the markets dropped by 50% completely changed their perspective, right? And so that long-term perspective is something fundamentally has changed with that company, then you need to make a change. One of the things that I find really interesting that happens a lot is the way that people view, because of the political situation right now in the country and the volatility right now in the market and some of the headlines that seems like we always end up kind of popping back up, is you have a lot of questions about the market's volatility and whether or not this is the end. Right? And I always go back and I say to people, I think one basic premise when it comes to us investing in the companies that we own and the way that we go and manage a portfolio is that, do we believe that the American dream is over? If the American dream's not over, then we can step back and make sure the fundamentals of those companies haven't changed. And if they haven't, then we can stay invested.
Yeah, there's an old saying that says the ability to predict markets moving forward lies in your ability to predict future human behavior. And I think we all know that, again, because finances and because money is such an emotionally charged topic, I think it's important to note that, that men and women think about it differently. Older and younger people think about it differently. And I think one of the roles that we always play is just helping people navigate that emotionally charged situation. A lot of times you have to satisfy a lot of folks as you're kind of creating plans and helping people manage through that.
A lot of what motivates people is one of really two things, right? Fear or greed. Mm-hmm. And what's interesting is that you see both of those come into play if the market's high or if the market's low, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
And it's just kind of interesting, those conversations that you end up having. Well, a portfolio or the markets, I should say, the markets are down 20%, and the conversation that you hear back most of the time is, well, I don't want to lose everything.
Right.
The same is true when the markets and the portfolios are up 20, 30%. What do people want to do?
They want to buy more.
That's right. And so that becomes that it's the toughest thing to do is take from your winners and give to losers in a broad, and by losers I mean the ones that are still fundamentally sound. They're just happen to be down from where they started.
Yeah, I think sentiment plays a key role in that. I think we're living in a time right now where, as an example, the Dow Jones Industrial Average and the S&P 500 are not necessarily at all-time highs, but the Nasdaq is, and so people might be looking at technology. And speaking of emotions, they may come to us pretty soon and say, I just feel like I don't own enough technology in my portfolio. I think I need to own more. And I think, again, one of the jobs that we have is to help people keep those emotions in check, and help keep them, from, kind of falling victim to chasing the hot dots and chasing things that are just kind of running away from them to a certain degree, and making sure that we're staying on course.
You go and you think about with the financial crisis and the credit bubble that popped, you had a tremendous number of people who were like, get me out and get me out now, right? And they were very, very emotional. The reality is what our job is to keep them, or a financial advisor's job is to keep them from making mistakes that could end up costing. Because if the S&P 500 is at 667 and you sell, at what point are you going to get back in? Mm-hmm. Right? Managing that emotion that's inside there. Some of the other things that people can do is make sure that they understand where they are and with regard to their plan. And because if they've done the planning right, the planning is not about the markets going up every single day or every single year or every single month. To understand where that is, to understand that, yes, we may be down, but our rationale and our reasoning and the fundamental explanation as to why you have large companies that pay dividends and large companies that are growth-oriented, and going back to that and understanding if anything has changed in your risk parameters, then going through to invest, that helps you to manage that process, right?
Yeah, I think you're right on that, Robert. I think the idea for most investors is to have some level of understanding or thought behind, what does a loss look like to me? And how does that make me feel? I think one of the things that's always interesting if you look at any client's portfolios is that we tend to think of things in two different ways. One is in what I would call hard dollars, and then the other one is in percentages. So if I said, if I happen to have $1 million and you came to me and you said, Mike, if your portfolio was down 10%, what would you do? And I said, 10%, I think I could probably handle that. And then I asked the question a different way, and I said, well, Mike, what if your portfolio was down $100,000? Oh, no, I can't have that happen in my portfolio at all, not recognizing that they're the same number. And so that's one of those things that tends to tie into, the emotional aspect of money. And I think as everybody knows, the larger your portfolio grows, the more fluctuations you can see. You don't see the fluctuation in a percentage terms, but you can definitely see it in terms of hard dollars. And so those are things that I think investors need to think about in terms of, how am I going to react to that emotionally if I have a day when the market is down 3% in the middle of the day and I look and I say, oh my gosh, I'm down, I'm down $30,000 or I'm down $300,000 or whatever the number happens to be. How's that going to make me feel? And am I going to react irrationally to that?
That is so true. Because if you say that to that person at $100,000 and now it's worth $90,000, they're like, oh no, I would stay the course. You say you have $1 million and it's now you've lost $100,000. They're like, yeah, no, I probably would stay the course. But if you have $5 million and you're down $500,000, their response is it's visible that it's no longer stay the course. It's because of that number. And so the more money that you have to be prepared for more fluctuation that's inside of there. I think the real key is that when people have a different relationship when it comes to money, the way that they view it, the way they view what those outcomes need to be, the way they view where that is. And understanding that there's going to be market volatility, understanding what the outcomes are highly likely to be, means that it gives them the ability to step back and maybe not be as emotional, because when you're emotional, you end up making terrible mistakes when it comes to your portfolio.
Yeah, I think to your point, Robert, I said at the end of the day, having assets, having financial resources really is about one thing, and that's flexibility. That's what it affords you. It's, we all know it's probably not going to buy anybody a great deal of happiness. It can buy them certainly some material goods and some and vacations and can allow them to do things that they want to do from a charitable situation. But at the end of the day, I think it's about it really creates flexibility. And so if you can, it's not to say that you can take all the emotion away, but to the degree that you can limit its impact on managing to plan, I think that's really what creates the success.
Well, kind of with that, using your phrase, at the end of the day, we'll call this a wrap. Hey, I want to thank everyone for listening. I hope that this was useful. Please make sure you subscribe, share it on your socials, share it with people who may not have access to it. Maybe there's something inside of there where you've had conversations with your friends or family about topics just like this. Also, please feel free in the comment section to let us know what other topics you'd like to like for us to maybe take on and address. And with that, thank you very much.
See you next week.
We'll see you next time.
All right, so let's take care of some legal stuff. As a representative of Sanctuary Securities, Inc. and an investment advisory representative of Sanctuary Security Advisors, LLC Securities, offered through Sanctuary Securities, member FINRA and SPIC. Advisory services offered through Sanctuary Advisors, LLC, an investment registered investment advisor. Concenture Wealth Management is a DBA of Sanctuary Securities and Sanctuary Advisors, LLC.
This podcast is for informational purposes only and is not intended as an offer or solicitation with respect to the purchase or sale of any security. The content is developed from sources believed to be accurate. No warranty, express or implied, is made regarding the accuracy, adequacy, completeness, legality, reliability, or usefulness of any information.
Opinions expressed are subject to change without notice and are not intended as investment advice or to predict future performance. The views expressed herein are not necessarily representative of Sanctuary Securities, Inc. or Sanctuary Advisors, LLC, and should not be interpreted as investment advice.
Investing involves risk, including the potential loss of principal. No investment strategy can guarantee a profit against loss in periods of declining values. Past performance does not guarantee future results. Any investment discussed may not be suitable for all investors. Investors must take their own decisions based on their specific investment objectives and financial circumstances. Consult your financial professional before making any investment decision.
No part of this communication is intended to be construed as tax or legal advice. Please discuss your specific situation with a qualified tax or legal professional.